reading from the Holy Gospel according to Luke. Each year, Jesus' parents went to Jerusalem for the Feast of Passover. And when he was 12 years old, they went up according to festival custom. After they had completed its days, as they were returning, the boy Jesus remained behind in Jerusalem, but his parents did not know him. Thinking that he was in the caravan, they journeyed for a day, and looking for him among their relatives and acquaintances, but not finding him, they returned to Jerusalem to look for him. After 3 days, they found him in the temple, sitting in the midst of the teachers, listening to them and asking them questions. And all who heard him were astounded at his understanding and his answers. When his parents saw him, they were astonished. And his mother said to him, "Son, why have you done this to us? Your father and I have been looking for you with great anxiety." And he said to them, "Why were you looking for me? Did you not know that I must be in my Father's house?" But they did not understand what he said to them. He went down with them and came to Nazareth and was obedient to them. And his mother kept all these things in her heart. And Jesus advanced in wisdom and age and favor before God and man. The Gospel of the Lord. Praise to the Lord Jesus Christ. Father Chris Hainu had just set up his manger scene in his church in Queens, New York, and was doing his last-minute checks before Mass. Lights were on and candles were lit. He looked over at the manger scene, and there was Mary and Joseph and the shepherd and the baby in the manger. Then he did a double take. He looked again. There was Mary and Joseph and the shepherd and the baby in the manger. Only the baby was a real baby, just a few hours old, wrapped in an old tattered blanket, the umbilical cord still attached. In New York State, there's a very good law that if parents are unable to take care of a newborn baby, they can drop the baby off at a church or a hospital or a police station free of prosecution, as long as someone is there, or if they notify someone immediately to the presence of the child, which actually wasn't done in this case, so the police were looking for the parents. There's a similar law in New Hampshire, apparently, for infants up to 7 days old. Well, what better way to begin this year of mercy in this Christmas season, Father Chris said, than to find a home for a baby in need. This baby was a little boy, born healthy and strong, and is now awaiting adoption into a loving family. Maybe the most amazing thing was the name of the church where the baby was dropped off. Holy Child Jesus Church in the Richmond Hill neighborhood of Queens. We're so used to thinking of baby Jesus as that little statue in our manger or the little painting on our Christmas card that perhaps we forget that Jesus was once a real live baby. He was a little boy, born healthy and strong, born with an umbilical cord that needed to be cut off. His parents didn't have very much either. Mary and Joseph were poor and practically homeless as they journeyed to Bethlehem. But they were able to turn even a stable into a home for the baby Jesus with just a few swaddling clothes and an abundance of love. Love is what we need in our homes, more than anything else. We don't need designer clothes or a new car or a perfect house in order to be happy in our families. We need love. Love is what we need more than anything else. I remember my parish priest once paid my parents a compliment, and we never had that much growing up. My mom didn't work, my dad had a manufacturing job, but my parish priest said, "You know, your kids always look so happy. That's because you guys love each other," he said. Love is the secret to happiness in our homes, in our world, and everywhere. Mary and Joseph had their priorities in order for their family. They were about putting the things of God first, not putting the things of the world first and then fitting in God when they could. We hear today that they were in the practice every year of going up to Jerusalem like all devout Jews to celebrate the Passover. And they would bring the child Jesus along with them. They tried to introduce the child Jesus from as young an age as possible into the life of their faith, into a growing personal relationship with God. They wanted Jesus to know that he had a Father in heaven who was always watching over him. And it was at home that Jesus learned this faith. This faith grew in him not just because they brought him to the temple every year or because they brought him to the synagogue in Nazareth on the Sabbath every week, but because they lived their faith at home. God was first in their home. It was there that Jesus learned obedience. He learned to grow in wisdom, age, and grace before God and men. So, when it came time for Jesus, he was 12 years old, to bring him to the temple on the official age when a Jewish boy became a man, Jesus was ready to stand on his own feet and to make this faith his own. He knew the scriptures backwards and forward. He had learned how to pray. He had learned virtue. He, from a young age, already had a growing personal friendship with God. Through the experience of his own family, he learned that he was part of a bigger family of love, God's family. Beloved, we are God's children now. God loved us so much that when we were helpless, when we were without love, when we were homeless, he invited us into his family. Jesus is God's only begotten Son, begotten before the world began, but we're all God's sons and daughters by adoption. There was once a little boy who grew up in a devout family. And one day he was out playing outside, doing all the things that a little boy does, digging in the dirt, and rolling around the ground with his dog, and jumping around the playground. And finally his mother called him to come inside and to have dinner. So he came into the house and sat down at the table. "Young man, let me look at your hands," his mother said. Well, there was some rubbing of his hands on his blue jeans before he held them up. "How many times do I have to tell you to wash your hands before you sit down at this table? If I just look at them, they're filthy. As soon as we say the blessing, I want you to march to the bathroom and scrub those hands. Look at those germs, you could get sick." Well, they said the grace, and then the little boy rather sulkily went off to the bathroom. But as he went, he could be heard muttering under his breath, Jesus and germs, that's all I ever hear about around here. And I've never seen a one of them." Well, far from being an invisible presence in our homes, merely that, Jesus is very visible. That's the whole point of Christmas, is that Jesus took on our flesh. He, too, was once a real little boy who dug in the dirt, who had to wash his hands before he ate. He lives a fully human life so that we can learn to live a fully human life as well. We learn from Jesus the central importance of the family in God's plan. Jesus lived 30 of his 33 years at home in Nazareth with his family. All the things we think of Jesus doing, his miracles, his preaching, his death, his resurrection, were only in the last 3 years. The first 30 years he spent with his family. The family is sometimes called the domestic church, the church in the home. If a child doesn't learn in the context of the home, the context of love, what it means to believe in God and to love God, he or she is not going to learn it anywhere else. If parents don't pass on in the context of the home their relationship with God, then no amount of preaching from the priest or faith formation classes can possibly compensate. That's why the church says that parents are the first evangelizers of their child. You have to be the first one as a parent to give your child the gospel, to help them to know that the love of God for us in Jesus. Children, you have a duty to respect and obey your parents as long as you live in the home, but also, even afterwards, to be grateful to them for giving you life and to pray for them and to take care of them in their old age. There came a time when Joseph and Mary had to let go of their child and allow him to do the mission that God had given him in this life on earth. But when that time came, Jesus was ready because of everything he had learned in his family experience. There he had learned to be obedient to Mary and Joseph. So he was ready to be obedient to God the Father, who called him to give his life on the cross for us. He was obedient even unto death on the cross. Today's feast reminds us that we don't need perfect families, but we do need holy ones. Places where we learn to love each other, to put God first, and to love God with our whole heart. So tonight we can look again at that manger scene and see there not just statues, but living reminders of what our own families can be.